Hello, Writerly friends! I have a bit of a special video for you today. I got a question through one of my patrons, and I actually decided that I would share this answer with all of you because I think it's something that a lot of writers struggle with, and although I have touched on it in the past, I haven't given my answer, my way to go about doing things. So, let's dive right in! My patron's question went a little like this. Whenever I start a story, I find that I lose momentum if I focus too much on the planning/world building phase. Should I dive into a story with minimal planning to keep momentum, or force my way through more planning to make sure everything works? Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Max, you have talked about this in the past, and you also made your own planning guide for how to plan a novel. Why do we need to talk about this? I think we need to talk about this because although I have shared my process, I haven't giving you my own spin on it. I haven't told you how I go about doing things. And that is, in part, my fault, because I wanted to give you the most open-ended advice. And I didn't want to have mostly my colors in it. Because I ultimately feel that every writer needs to find their own way to go about doing things. And that's good, that's part of the process. I can't just give you my tools and expect you to create novels with my tools. You have to change my tools, throw the ones that don't work for you, and modify the ones that do. That's just writing as a whole. Of course, in the process, I have omitted showing you how I use those tools. So I thought that I would use this question as a great example to tackle one of the big questions in writing, because although my patron's question is really good, I think it ultimately boils down to a much simpler question that everyone deals with. What is that question? The question is, how much world building is enough world building? Of course, there is no objective answer to this question. As I've mentioned, every writer needs to find their own way to go about doing things. That's just the nature of this. Anyone who goes around claiming that their advice is ultimate is being kind of a fool, if you ask me, right? There's no sure way to go about doing writing. That is why I'm coming into this question with the enormous disclaimer that the following is my way of doing things. The way I have found that makes writing the most fun possible. So, with that disclaimer out of the way, let's actually answer the question. How much world building is enough? Well, in her question, my patron described a scenario where she had a story idea, and a well-defined story idea, and she shared her sentiments that I kind of agree with, that once you start having to create maps and have to deal with brainstorming world figures and political systems, the world stops being fun and you kind of get bogged down with all of the details. And you know what? I actually kind of agree. For me, writing, the most fun in writing is the discovery process, is unraveling the story as it comes to you. That is why my outlines are really small. They are actually. I do use the process that I outline in my video series. I use it. I just don't go into a lot of detail. Why? I've written a lot of stories, and I found that no matter what I do, no matter how strict I may try to be, the story goes its own way every time. And that goes for every aspect. The way the characters are, the way they behave, and the lore itself. I am not kidding you. I recently wrote a story called Shoujo's Bizarre Adventure, and during the brainstorming process, I had to come up with this celestial system, and I dedicated 3 whole paragraphs to writing down what I thought the system worked like. And of course, as soon as I began writing, I realized that that system was entirely wrong, and that I was looking at it from a different point of view. And that encompasses my advice for this, because I find that this is the point in which writers are divided into 2 groups. There are writers who believe the outline is always right, and that the outline is the mold, the Bible by which everything else should be judged. And then there's the other side, where I stand, in which I believe that the story is always right. Now, let me change the subject real quick. Do you ever just make impressions of people before meeting them? Do you ever find yourself hearing a really bad story about somebody, and when you first meet this person, you have all of those impressions come into the foreground, and then you start seeing contrast? Oh, this person who has all these awful stories going about is actually not as bad as you thought. Or they could be as bad as you thought. But ultimately, I find that those impressions tend to be wrong. And that kind of leads into writing as well. I have found that Every time I create an impression of a character, which is basically the brainstorming process of that character, I find that all of those things tend to be wrong. They just tend to be wrong. And that's okay, because when you get down to it, my personal opinion, outlining is just creating one big impression of the story. Why would the outline be right? What right does the outline have for knowing what the story is gonna be about? You haven't been to that world, you haven't met those characters, you haven't experienced the story. To me, it took me a long while to get around that and to realize that, and when I grasped the concept that the outline is merely just a starting point, a story seed, if you may, a little point from which something greater will spring, and that greater thing will always be entirely different than what you expected it to be. I keep joking about this, but one of these days, I am going to upload the original character sheets for Lucian from Raven's Gem, and for like Justine and Annabelle from Justine's Blood, just so you realize how different they are. For me, the outline is like the kiddie's pool. It is the place you go to get your feet wet and adjust yourself to the temperature of the water before you go into the deep end, which is the actual act of telling the story. And as I've mentioned before, the fun for me is discovering the story. It is going through this ridiculous place and ridiculous characters and discovering who they really are, because ultimately, what right do I have for my little brainstorming process to discover these people entirely? What right does that process have? None! Ultimately, it's just merely a way to get our minds going into that place. It is a way for our minds to dive into the setting. But ultimately, if you ask me, it's just that. It's not a Bible, it's not a gospel, it's just, if anything, a meditating exercise to get you into the mind frame of that alternate mystical dimension where your story takes place. And I am going to be honest, I 110 million% agree with your sentiment, Amy Rose. I stopped super outlining my stories because I found that it stopped being exciting. Once I forced myself to create this super strict impressions of my characters and places and setting, it stopped being fun because I had already created them in my mind. I had already made them people, and I took from myself the opportunity to discover them as people. How much world building is enough world building? Just enough so you know what the story is about, who the players are, and what is going to happen in the story. Or what you think maybe should probably happen in the story. That's it. And I know what you're thinking, but Max, what if something in the story happens that is so drastically different that it changes everything? Then you know what that means? It means the outline was wrong, just like impressions tend to be wrong. And what do you do then? You roll with the punches, you keep writing, you keep going. That's the magic of writing. And to be entirely honest, of course, the following is merely just my opinion and the way I feel about things, but if the story doesn't surprise you, how can you expect it to surprise the readers? And once again, if you're asking me, Max, how much world building do you consider to be enough? I think that enough for you to be confident with who the actors in this story are, what stage is it taking place, and what events do you think may happen in the story. That is it. None of those things are set in stone, all of them are probably going to change, and that's okay. It's fine. I know that a lot of writers, particularly people who are getting started with writing, are afraid that the story will get out of hand. And I want to empower you to let the story get out of hand. Let it go where it needs to go. You can't keep forcing the story to just be what you wanted it to be from the outline. I know that that may be heresy to some people, and that's okay. We all have different opinions and different views, and that's the good thing. Because if we all wrote in the same way, then all stories would be the same. What I want you to take from this is that outlining and planning and world building is not set in stone, and it's not the end-all to everything. Throughout many stories and many books, and even the stories that I'm writing right now, I keep finding that in the process of writing, I discover that the characters are not who I expected them to be. And that's good. And you know what that means? It means that I was wrong. I created the wrong impression of this character, and that's good. It's fine. It's good to make mistakes, because ultimately, the surprise and the discovery makes the story a better experience. Hey, do you remember that one story where everything went according to plan and nothing was unexpected? Neither do I. So, the next time you are in the middle of writing and you realize that a character is doing something that contradicts the outline, I want to empower you and encourage you that to, instead of stopping to check or instead of stopping to judge or second guess, that you follow that character. Follow them into the darkness, into the depths, and see where they take you. It may not be what you expected, but I think it will be more fun. Again, just my 2 cents. I hope that this helps, and I hope that, if anything, this has given you a point of reference, another point of view through which you can create a method that works for you. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like and subscribe if you want more. If you have questions of your own that you would like me to answer, feel free to leave them in the comments below. That being said though, this video is dedicated to Amy Rose and the rest of my awesome patrons. Patreon is a wonderful system that allows content creators like myself to be directly rewarded and funded by the people who believe in their content. My patrons are not only enabling me to create content like this and helping me, but they're also helping countless other writers like you and you and you. So this episode is entirely dedicated to them. If you would like to learn more about Patreon and the piles upon piles of perks that you can earn by pledging a little bit of your money towards my cause, you can click on the annotation in the screen right now and I'll take you straight to it. That being said, if you would like even more Writerly content, such as Writerly inspiration, prompts, and advice, head over to my writing blog over at maxkieran.tumblr.com. Again, thank you for watching, thank you for spending a little bit of your day with me, and I will be seeing you soon. Mwah!